It's the mom life.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Living in the Moment with V and Steph. We don't have Steph with us today, but I am so excited that we do have Kayla joining us today. She is a wife, a dog mom, a nature lover, and a midwife. And I follow Kayla on Instagram. I feel like everything that she posts and does is so beautiful and so sacred. And so I'm constantly asking her questions. Today is not only Cinco de Mayo, but it is National Midwife Day. And so I was super excited when she agreed to join us. Kayla, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and what led you to become a midwife?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And thank you so much for thinking about midwives and honoring the day and honoring the day of the midwife. That's super special. I'm super excited to be here and have this conversation with you. Um, so I'm a home birth midwife. I've been practicing for about 3 years now. I'm also a nurse, which means I'm a certified nurse midwife, which is just um, kind of describes like the route of education that I've had to become a midwife. There are different types of midwives, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole unless you want to. But I'm a certified nurse midwife. I also still practice as a nurse part time. Before I became a midwife, I worked as a psychiatric nurse for about 7 years. And then since becoming a midwife, which is my primary job now, but I also work part time as a sexual assault and forensics nurse examiner in the hospital as well too.
Oh wow, that is such a huge shift, and it sounds like you still have, one foot in the door in the other extreme. And so does that bring you good balance because they're so different? One is, I feel like one's a little dark, but you're doing good things and you're helping, and the other one
Yeah.
you're bringing life.
No, totally. I mean, that's a great question because when I was originally transitioning out of psychiatry and we can like talk about like how that journey happened, but when I was originally transitioning out of psychiatry and moving into midwifery, I had that same thought. I remember I was talking to my husband and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like am I crazy? Like this doesn't really make any sense. Like how is this going to work?" Like the two didn't seem to go together at all. And so, yeah, the sexual assault and forensics nurse, they seem probably like vastly different. Like one's really positive and the other one's like kind of dark, but actually, like, I love it. I mean, the reasons I've always been interested in SANE, which again is like another story, but the reasons why I feel like it goes really well is because, predominantly as a sexual assault and a forensics nurse, we see a lot of victims are women. Um, and a lot of the work that we do with these women, like who have suffered different types of assault, a lot of times, unfortunately, it is sexual assault. So I actually feel like my midwifery skills and my psychiatry skills translate really well to this job. And I actually get to bring in a lot of my like midwifery skills and background and personality when I'm like taking care of these women who've suffered like such a horrible thing, but it's a lot of like holding space for people, which is what psych is, which is what midwifery and birth is kind of like holding space. And yeah, I guess they're just like all the parts of um, health and care that have always been really interested in being a part of.
And so, is that what led you to the midwife? On that journey, is it seeing all of this kind of violence against women? Because it sounds like you just have a love for women, which thank you so much. I feel like we need
Mhm.
more of that in this world. But is that what led you?
Kind of. So the psych came before the midwifery, and then the sexual assault part actually came after. I was practicing as a midwife for a couple of years before I did the sexual assault stuff, which I kind of picked up as I was transitioning into a different midwife job. So it was sort of like supportive income, but yeah, something I've always been really passionate in. But yeah, kind of. So my path into midwifery is probably like pretty atypical. I feel like most people who are midwives, either become a midwife because of their own childbirth experiences, and I haven't given birth yet. Or in my path of midwifery, which was a nurse midwife, a lot of the people in my program, they were like either doulas or they were labor and delivery nurses and kind of like transitioned. I was the only one who sort of came from this like totally different world. Um, But my path, I mean, so to try not make too long of a story, but I've always been really interested in more natural and holistic remedies when it comes to health and healing. I started practicing yoga at a really young age, like in my teens. And then I quickly like started studying that philosophy, and I became certified as a teacher in my early 20s. And my path of yoga has really informed a lot of my journey towards health and healing in general. And so once I started working, when I was working in psych, I kind of got like burned out from hospital. Like I love psychiatry, I love mental health. It informs my practice as a midwife every day, all the time. But I started to get burnt out of the hospital. And so I was trying, it really came from a place of thinking, okay, what is my next step? I really wanted to be more involved in the care plan with the clients that I was working with. And I actually thought about going back to school as a psych nurse practitioner for a little bit. But the Western medicine side of psychiatry is so heavily focused on medications that I felt like if I went that route, all I would really learn is how to prescribe medications. And I didn't want to do that. So I started to sort of like lean back into the holistic side, and I like considered herbalism for a while. And I found I found myself in a herbal apprenticeship program that was geared towards women, and it was more like ancestrally based. That's when I learned about the midwife, and that's when I learned, I always thought that midwives were just about delivering babies, but I learned about the history of the midwife, who was really the village wise woman and the healer, like the village healer. Like they weren't just babies, but they took care of women on the entire spectrum of their life and from a really holistic place. And so once I heard that, that's kind of when all the light bulbs went off. And that's really how I got into midwifery. And then, learned that there was this whole nursing route of midwifery. And yeah, that's kind of what started that journey.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that because not too long ago, and when I say y'all not too long ago, I mean a couple months ago, I actually saw this post that said, and I love women, like I'm all about women, supporting women, but I saw this post that said, uh, women that were burned in the stake or were considered witches, a lot of them were just midwives with a lot of knowledge on herbs. And so I sent Kayla that post, and she's like, yep. And I was like, oh my God, that breaks my heart. um,
Mm-hmm.
but going back, and this is another post that I sent her actually, the original midwives were dolphins. Is that correct? Is
Yeah, I mean, I have heard that. I don't think that like it's anything that you'll find in any kind of program that teaches midwifery today. um, but definitely like I'm all for like the woo-woo. Like my midwifery practice is very spiritual. And I've definitely heard that theory before. But what's really cool about dolphins though in general, I mean, the people out there in the world can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that dolphins still today, when they give birth, they do like it's like a village, like a bunch of dolphins will come and surround the dolphin that's birthing. And I think they're like one of the only animals that really does that, where they all come and like support. But I've definitely heard that. I've heard stories about women who will like specifically go into the ocean to birth their babies, and that dolphins will just appear out of nowhere and come and surround the woman in a circle. It's very, very cool.
yes,
I would love to see it. I would love to see that one day.
I was trying to look up videos when I sent that to you because it was like in a village where women go into the ocean and dolphins just appear on their own and they kind of surround the woman
Mm-hmm.
and keep her calm to have her birth. And I thought, oh my God, so beautiful. Anyways, that was a side note, y'all. I think it's so neat everything that Kayla does. And again, this is more like a Q&A. But I did want to ask, what is one thing that people usually misunderstand about midwifery? Because I've only gone
Mm-hmm.
to term, like full term with JJ, one of my babies. And so I wasn't even given the option to have a midwife. I had to go right away to a high risk because I had several losses prior to him. So I don't know
Mm-hmm.
much about midwifery, and and just wanted to kind of scratch your brain on that. But what is, one thing usually people misunderstand about it?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that question. That's such a great question. I think in my experience, honestly, the thing that I hear the most is just that many people don't even know what a midwife is. And it's funny because it kind of like, you could go down like the whole history of obstetrics, which is like the medical specialty of birth and pregnancy. It's like what most women birthing in the hospital will have an obstetrician and OB. But the whole history of the creation of that field is really interesting and would be a great podcast for another day. But yeah, I mean, I think just because of how midwifery in general was sort of like wiped out basically, like before OBs were a thing, which was not that long ago. It's only been a couple hundred years that we had obstetrics and OB. Before that, it was midwives delivering babies. But to reference the post that you mentioned earlier about how like the original witches and stuff were midwives, and it's true, like all the women that were being burned at the stake, like that were like accused of being witches and practicing magic and witchcraft, like, yeah, those were midwives. They were just a village healer. And really, like, why that happened sort of leads into the creation of obstetrics and men getting involved in pregnancy and birth and all of that. But because midwifery basically got like forgotten, a lot of people don't know what a midwife is. They either don't know what it is because they've just never heard it, or I think people assume that we're, again, this like, untrained, uneducated, sort of like wild birthing attendant that just kind of like attends births like in the backyard in a barn and like we don't know what we're doing, kind of thing. So, again, like the history of midwifery is a whole other topic that we could go down. But basically, I think just having people understand that as midwifery is being revitalized today, midwives today, we are actually fully independent licensed healthcare providers. We are trained to be able to take care of women throughout their pregnancy, birth, and entire postpartum experience all by ourselves, with small caveat depending on the state that you're in. Some states require midwives to be overseen by doctors, but here in Colorado, where I live, we are not. So we are fully independent. And of course, we can like consult with OBs and all those kind of things if we need to. Our scope is low risk, healthy women, but we are fully capable to take care of them all on our own.
Yeah, I feel like even, you touch base, I feel like that's the patriarchy, right? Getting involved
Mm-hmm.
and getting rid of smart
Mm-hmm.
women, but you can't hold us back, and you're an example you're an example of that, and I love that. I know
We're
you.
coming back.
That's right. And so,
Yeah.
going back to that, how do you approach creating a birth plan for someone?
Yeah. So for me, primary because so as a home birth midwife, I attend birth only in the homes. Like I don't attend in hospital. I do home birth only. And so for me, I think when creating a birth plan with a mother or a family, one of the things that I think that I like to talk about the most is what is having a conversation with mothers and families about what helps labor flow, because that will then guide their like quote unquote birth plan. But a lot of it is talking about safety and support. Like that's a lot of what's involved in a birth plan at home, because for our families who are planning to birth at home, that really is kind of like the sum of their birth plan, right? It's to be able to labor and to birth and to stay at home. So we talk about ways that they can prepare for birth and labor that help it flow, and a lot of that has to do with creating safety and support. So who they want to be there in the space, a lot of education and prep work with partners about how to support moms and their partners during labor, and discussions around like the physiology of labor and birth and what helps it flow. So a lot of this is like privacy, it's low lights, it's quiet, We talk about, the differences between early and active labor and when is the best time for your birth team to arrive, and things like that. And then what I also really love about home birth too is because we are at home and we're not at a facility that has other policies and regulations and things like that, it's an opportunity for women to be really creative. So I talk to, like, when it's your first birth, sometimes it's hard. Like, you don't know what you're going to want or what you're not going to want. But I always tell moms, like, it's an opportunity for you to be really creative and like really to sit with and create like a vision. Like, if you were to create a vision of your birth, like, what would that look like? Water, no water, like water birth, no water birth. And so we just talk a lot because that can mean different things to different people. And so just opening up that conversation is kind of a good place to start too.
Oh, that, yeah. I feel like when I was having my son, I was a deer in headlights and I didn't know what to do. And I didn't have anyone but Google to kind of
Mm,
guide me. So I'm glad that, you guys do offer that, because I will say my high risk, same thing, like, no, you're going to have a C-section, you're going to have this. Like, I had no
mm,
option. He just, this is what's going to happen. And he didn't explain a lot of things. I'm grateful
mm,
that I had my baby, but I feel like I could have had a different experience. So I know
yeah.
you said you do home births, but what are the main differences between a hospital birth, a home birth, and a birthing center? Because a birthing center, is that like a hospital? I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, so it depends. It can be. So, yeah, hospital birth, obviously, like you're in the hospital. With a hospital birth, you have access to the full scope of medical intervention, I guess you could say. You're usually doing continuous monitoring of the baby, which is where, they put the little belt on mommy's bellies and then the heart rate is up on the screen and they're watching it the whole time. Um, so there's that. And then you have access to like epidurals and pain medication and OR and all that stuff. You're fully in the hospital, usually by an OB. However, again, another topic that could be for another podcast later is that now there are midwives, like nurse midwives are able to work in the hospital. So some hospitals are starting to integrate midwives. And I would say midwifery care, although I won't go down that rabbit hole because it's really hard to uphold the midwifery model of care in the hospital. But again, that would be like a topic for later. But you could possibly have a midwife in the hospital depending on where you're at. And then, so for birthing centers, there's two. Like some hospitals do have a birthing center like attached to their facility, so on the same grounds as the hospital. And mothers who birth there, like they may be able to like birth in the water, but like also have access to epidurals, just depending on the hospital and the policies. Like some birthing centers are associated with hospitals, and then you have birthing centers that are called freestanding birthing centers, and those ones are not, so they stand alone, apart from a hospital. Most of the time they're like within city limits, so it's not like hospitals are far away, but they're detached from the hospital system, and they're fully on their own. So they're similar to home birth in that we don't do continuous monitoring of baby. We don't have the electronic fetal monitoring. We're listening with a handheld Doppler intermittently. So that means like we don't do epidurals, we don't do like IV pain medication. There's no like OR nearby, and or OBs. Most of the time, those are mainly like freestanding birth centers, and home births are predominantly done by midwives.
And so, like, as far as the technology, is it because you guys want to do like more natural remedies and procedures versus like all the medical treatment? Because I also feel like the hospitals just do extra
Yeah.
because they want to bill you. But um,
Yeah. Also another rabbit hole we could go
yeah.
down. um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's like twofold. I mean, the whole electronic fetal monitoring system is not like applicable in the home setting, or like, yeah, it doesn't financially really make sense. And then, but yeah, also too, it's more because Um, let's see. I mean, without getting like too deep into the woods, into the weeds, electronic fetal monitoring for a low risk, healthy pregnancy actually really isn't evidence based for like best practice for a low risk, healthy mom. So, what a lot of the data has found with electronic fetal monitoring or continuous monitoring of the baby is that it actually is a higher risk for, it leads to more interventions, which again would be like a larger conversation that we could get into. But just really, briefly there. So in home birth and birthing centers, we do intermittent fetal monitoring, which means we're not listening the whole time. We listen like, based off of where you are in labor, we listen at certain points, usually like every 30 minutes or every like 5 or 10 minutes based off of what's going on. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I've actually read that too much monitoring can be bad
Mm-hmm.
for the baby. Like just leave the baby alone. They're fine. And so I was actually poked and prodded once a month because I was high risk. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Again, I have my thoughts on that. It's just another bill. My baby was fine, and
Mm-hmm.
I am grateful for all the intervention. I don't want to talk bad about that, but I do
Yeah.
feel I could have had a different experience. But
Mm-hmm.
going back to even moms, because I do want to have a second. I tell my husband all the time. But what are some of the
Yeah.
most important things that expecting moms should focus on during pregnancy?
Mm. Yeah, that's such a great question. Um, I think so for me in my practice, one of the most important things that I really focus on with my moms and my families is nourishment. And so, of course, like, there's physical nourishment, like what are you putting into your body? Like, we could have a whole podcast on nutrition and exercise and all of that stuff. Is like physical nourishment is really important, but also emotional and spiritual nourishment as well too. I really talk to my families a lot about being nourished on all levels of your being. I just think, I mean, there's so many dynamics that we could get into about why this is so important. But like, one that I think just like as women, like we are natural pleasers, and we're always taking care of others, but we're rarely taking care of ourselves. And then also too, the system of just pregnancy and birth, like the medical system, which is where most mothers come from, whether they're coming to me, from their first baby and it's like all their family and friends have delivered in the hospital, or their first kiddos were in the hospital and now they're coming to the home birth. Like all of our indoctrination and programming is from this westernized, medicalized view of pregnancy and birth, which puts so much focus on babies, like even mothers. And of course, it's natural for a mother to like worry about their baby, like that's their job. But no one is asking, how is the mother? Like we're all like up in arms about what's going on with the baby, but we forget that the mom is the most essential part in the well-being of the baby. Like if we are not nourishing our mothers adequately, then we can't expect our babies to be nourished. But that is what the system is doing all the time, is it's stressing mothers out with this test and that test and high risk and low risk, and we're constantly like badgering and fear mongering mothers, and then wondering why we have all these complications and why these babies are not well, right? Like if we really want our babies to be well, we need our mothers to be well. That starts in pregnancy, and then for me that's like huge postpartum as well too. So I talk a lot to women about what does it mean for you to be nourished, and because that's different for each woman. Like how are you nourished physically? How are you nourished emotionally? Is it talking? Is it reading? Is it going for a walk? How are you nourished spiritually? And I really want to get to know them and get to know what these things are for them, because to me, that is the best way that I can take care of their baby. That is the best way that I can make sure that they are safe, is by nourishing them. And then it's just good practice to set them up for postpartum once the baby's here, which comes with whole other topics. But so I would say that like really focusing on nourishment, and then intuition. Focus a lot on starting to like reframe mothers that they know what's best for their babies and their pregnancies, because again, like the modern Western medicalized view of childbirth and healthcare is that the doctor is the expert and the doctor tells you what to do. There's no space for a mother's knowing and a mother's intuition, which is so, so important, again, for the well being of her pregnancy and her baby. And then lastly, I'll just say that I also give mothers a list of topics um, early on in pregnancy, like after they first hire me. I give them a list of topics that I really recommend and encourage that they look into. Um, like things like breach or going past their due date, like a lot of these things that create opportunity for a lot of intervention or a lot of decisions to be made, that I think it's so important to be informed. If you are not adequately informed on certain, like informed consent is something I think that gets um, twisted and manipulated a lot by doctors and providers of all kinds. And true informed consent means that we're really providing mothers and families with all the information and all the options and choices, not just the ones that we think are best or that they should do, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I actually got chills as you were talking because I remember I was high risk. I had four losses before I got to my son. So he was my fifth pregnancy. And I got diagnosed with APS, which is antiphospholipid syndrome, a blood clot disorder. But I remember
Mm.
getting to 20 weeks and I was, at the halfway point and I was so excited. And my doctor was, don't get he literally told me this because I got home cried. I told my husband, I told my close
Mm.
friends, but he's like, oh, don't get too excited, you can still have a stillborn. So just keep.
Hmm.
Yeah, like he just gave me more anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Anxiety on top of my
Mm-hmm.
anxiety. And I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't beat this guy because he's who I had and I trusted him because that's all I had. But I really had to kind of rein in my thoughts and my fears. And I prayed a lot and I spoke to my baby, and I had to just really focus on my spirituality to get through my pregnancy. And I knew in my heart everything was going to be fine, and everything was fine. But as far as the nourishment, of the woman and her mind, that we're carrying the baby, right? We're the shell. And so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we're forgotten. And I love that you say, that you bring that up because that is so important. So often women are dismissed even when they're bringing life into this world. They're just
Mm-hmm.
like a stepping stone instead of, no, they are the ones bringing life. And we have the authority to bring life. And so I think that's beautiful that you mentioned that. And so I can't imagine how much families give, or can be negative to some of your patients because we're so trained and we're so indoctrinated in the Western, medical society, and this is what's right and this is what's best. And so how do you support moms through their anxiety or fears during pregnancy when they go to you? Because I'm sure they have family
Mm-hmm.
members and friends who might be negative about that decision they're making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's such a great question. Um, yeah, I mean, and I think that this is where my background in psychiatry and my path through yoga and just the importance of your mental health and your spiritual health and all of that really has such a huge role in pregnancy and birth. And what many birth workers who've been, attending birth for a long time will tell you is that, if you don't deal with your crap before pregnancy, it will come up during pregnancy. It will come up during childbirth for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, so I feel like addressing anxiety and fears is so important for pregnancy and birth. It's like number one. So I'd say the first thing that's really important for addressing that is creating a safe space and a relationship. I think that's one of the benefits to midwifery care. And there are a lot of different models of midwifery care out there. But for me, like that's one of the reasons why I feel like the relationship that I make with my families, that I create with my families, is so important for them to feel like this is a safe space for them to share any feelings, anything that comes out, any doubts. Because like, let's just be real, like we all have trauma, regardless of what that is. We've all gone through difficult things that we're shameful of, things that were hard. um and yeah, and society today does not really prioritize mental health and healing, and so many people have suppressed many things, which is just, that's what we've learned in our society. And so I think what's really important is speaking to them. A lot of people don't want to talk about their fears and during pregnancy, but then what I see is that it comes up during birth, and then it's so much harder. So I would say, like, this is a place that's really good to where we use like some practical tools like meditation and mindfulness, and yoga. But I'd really say just like creating space for that excavation to witness those anxieties, witness those fears. Don't suppress them, because then they just get bigger and they just get scarier.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It sounds like you're really building their confidence in their own instincts, because we forget that we're in power as well, and put a lot of power on the doctor or anyone that's helping us. And yeah, I think that's beautiful that you do that. So what is one of the biggest myths about childbirth that you want to bust? Do you have one?
Hmm. Yes. I love that question. Well, there's several. But when I was thinking about this, I think probably one of the biggest ones to me, I think just because I hear it so much, is that no one other than the mother delivers her baby. I just hear so often, even when people ask me what I do, or I hear my parents like share what I do or anything else, we're always like, oh yeah, they're a doctor, they deliver babies, or she's a midwife and she delivers babies. And it kind of just continues to um, indoctrinate us in this idea that we are not birthing our babies, and that we cannot birth our babies without, and then fill in the blank. And then that's where you get hospitals, epidurals, doctors, like whatever else, like you name it. Like, as women, we just think that, and this is what keeps the hospital system really like alive and well, is that women, we have like come to believe that it's not us birthing our babies, that we can't do it without something else. And this isn't to say, like, I don't believe that women are meant to birth in isolation or to birth alone, just that I think that there's a very sacred and important role for a midwife, a doctor, whoever is attending a birth. But what I see that role is, what I view as my most important role of being a midwife, is simply to hold your hand and remind women that you can do this. Most of the time, that's all I ever have to do. Most of the time, that's it, is I just show up and tell women that you can do this. And then that's what happens. Like, babies, contrary to what we've been told about birth and all of these things that we need, babies are just born. That's what I see all the time, is that 98% of the time babies are just born. Like, are there going to be some outliers every now and then? Yeah, of course, absolutely. Like our training and our clinical skills, sometimes they're needed and they're used. But yeah, I mean, I just want to remind women that you are birthing your baby. I don't care if it's at home, if it's at the hospital, it doesn't matter. You birth your baby.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, they had told me, we recommend a C-section because you have a blood clot condition. Granted, I've
Mm,
I've only ever been diagnosed with that when I'm pregnant. And so I know your body acts different when you're pregnant, but when I'm not pregnant, I'm negative for that, for APS. And so the doctor
mm,
was quick to say, we're going to have to do a C-section because you're going to need blood bags there essentially in case because you're probably going to lose too much blood and so forth. I mean, it was a lot of fear. And a
mm-hmm,
couple of my friends, they went on to have natural births. And I feel like I would have, like, in my heart, I feel like I would have been just fine. My pregnant, thank God, had no anything spectacular. It was normal. It was healthy. It was just more in my mind because of everything the doctor was telling me. And so
mm-hmm,
I do feel like, yes, I could have done it just fine, and my body was meant for this. It was ready for it. I felt it to my bones, but again, you have that fear that they place in you, and you kind of just go with what you're being told to go through. Um,
Mhm.
so that's hard. I will also say my
Yeah.
first time in the hospital, I packed basically half of my house. and and so what's
Mhm.
one item that you always recommend that a woman pack for her delivery bag?
Mhm. Yeah, I know. I was thinking about this too, which was kind of like a tricky one because, for us, we're like, we're birthing in the home. And I guess like if your birth plan is the hospital or if our birth plan is changing to the hospital, I think the most important thing is like your literal birth plan for the hospital, like your list of things that are most important to you because as the mother, once you go into labor, then, you're in this compromised emotional state, which is one reason why I think it's so easy to fearmonger women into making certain decisions when they're in labor and birth, because you're in a vulnerable state. But so that's why I think it's really important to have written out a list of things, of your priorities, of your wishes, whether it's like delayed cord clamping, or you don't want vitamin K, or you want baby to go straight to your chest, because my experience in most hospital settings is you're not going to be asked those things. Like that's not how they operate, right? They're just going to do what they think is best, or they're just going to do without saying, without asking. That's just kind of how it works there. So I think, and like to help your partner or whoever's there to support you to be able to advocate for your wishes, for the things that you want, I think that's the most important. And then I guess just thinking about like what your essential comfort items are. Hospital food and drink is not great.
Yeah.
So thinking about those things as well too.
And what are your thoughts? This just came to me as you were talking, at because I was in
Yeah.
the hospital. But what are your thoughts on the placenta? Because I know I've read, they take it away. You don't ever hear about it. Some
Mm-hmm.
women make them into capsules and retake them.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I personally have like a very deep, sacred reverence for the placenta. I think it is a super sacred organ that we have like largely been really disassociated from. And yeah, I mean, from a scientific evidence based place, I mean, no one to my knowledge is really studying, the medicine of taking your placenta internal. So it depends on what perspective you want to take. But from my experience and from historical experience, yeah, women have been utilizing the power and the medicine of their placentas forever. And a lot of my families, a lot of the women that I work with will end up encapsulating placentas. And I will say the vast majority find a lot of positive benefit from it, usually emotional things that it helps with. Some people will give placenta medicine to that child as well too. Same thing to help with like immune or like emotional things as well. But yeah, I found it really beneficial. And then not even just if families decide to encapsulate their placentas, but just honoring them in whatever kind of way. There are so many like traditional ancestral practices like burying the placenta. A lot of cultures view the placenta as the baby's like sacred twin in utero. So there's so many like wonderful things that you could do with the placenta, besides letting the hospital take it away, which again is another thing that they won't ask you. Like unless you tell them, they will just take it. And then there's the whole rabbit hole you could go down of
Right.
the black market placenta that they're being sold on the black market for their stem cells.
Right. They reap off of us and we lose all the
Mm-hmm.
benefits. Yeah, I've read that. And even just looking at nature, most animals will eat their own placenta for their for
Yes.
the nourishment. So
Mm-hmm.
I know we're not animals, but in nature, I mean, they don't have any greed or, business pursuit in anything that they do. And so I see it as innocent. So when I see an animal do something, I like really pay attention.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder because I'm sure you've probably heard that, yeah, like if there is a hemorrhage after birth or a mother is bleeding kind of like more heavily than normal, that they will eat parts of their like raw placenta. And it makes you wonder because animals do eat their placenta,
They
like
do.
not even just if they're hemorrhaging, it's just like a natural thing. And then, you know, like I always say too, like in nature and with humans too, like our labor and birth is so mental. And I feel like we are animals when it comes to birth for sure, but our brains get in the way. But yeah, it makes you wonder, like with animals that eat their placenta, it's like animals aren't dying at rapid rates due to childbirth and hemorrhage. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
animals are getting extinct usually from like human or man-made or
Intervention.
other like yeah, or like other like natural things, but it's not because of childbirth. Like animals aren't disappearing because they're dying in childbirth, and they are eating their placentas. So it does make you wonder like what the natural, you know, purpose is behind the placenta in that kind of way too.
Right. And they bounce back faster. Like my thoughts go to that. Like they're eating it for nourishment and they bounce back a lot faster than we do. And so I don't know. I do see a connection in that way. But
Mm-hmm.
turning to postpartum, what is one thing you wish people knew about the fourth trimester? And do you offer
Mm-hmm.
postpartum support?
Yeah, I love this question. Postpartum for me has become like a time that I become really invested in. We did not spend much time learning about postpartum in school. And yes, I think the number one thing that I would want women and families to know is that postpartum is just as important as birth. I feel like so much of time spent during pregnancy, whether it's like with yourself or your family or your provider, is talking about childbirth education and talking about birth, but no one is really talking about postpartum and how to prepare for postpartum. And postpartum is such an equally sacred time as birth and pregnancy, and one that has been largely undervalued. I believe that women are postpartum for like minimum a year. There are a lot of people out there who think that it's longer than that, but this idea that like postpartum is 6 weeks and then you bounce back and you're supposed to be normal again is just crazy and a total product of like modern industrialized culture, which again, we could have a whole podcast on postpartum. But it's so important. Please prepare for it. Two of my favorite people talking about postpartum that I recommend to my families. Kimberly Ann Johnson has a book called The Fourth Trimester, which is one of my favorites. I love that book. And a website called Innate Traditions, ran by a midwife, Michelle or Rochelle. But she talks a lot about postpartum in a really beautiful way. And yeah, I do provide postpartum care. Most midwives do. It's within our training and our scope to provide postpartum care to mothers and babies, so you don't have to get a pediatrician right away. A lot of times we look after newborns ourselves. And for me specifically, my postpartum care is in the home of mothers. So, typical home birth is like usually most midwives will have an office that families will come to see their midwife in the office for prenatal care. And then obviously, birth is in your home. And then for me personally, I do all of my postpartum care in the home as well. Because I believe that this time is so sacred that mothers should be able to stay at home in their house, bonding with their newborns, healing, resting. They shouldn't be getting in the car to go see a pediatrician at like one day to just weigh the baby, something that could be done at home, you know?
No, yes, and I actually feel so strongly about postpartum. I didn't have postpartum depression, but I will say I don't feel like I felt like my old self until a little over the year mark, maybe like, a month or two. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like, "Oh, you should be fine at 6 weeks," and people go back to work and I'm like, "What? Are you kidding me?" Like I
Yeah.
you don't feel like yourself. Even you have, they call it mom brain. I still have mom brain. My baby's almost two and a
Mm-hmm.
half. And so, yeah, I think that's big. Um, I only have a couple more questions. I don't want to keep you too long, but
Yeah.
and really because this you say you do home births, and so what is one of the craziest birth stories that you've witnessed? And of course, we'll keep this
Mm-hmm.
anonymous.
Yeah. 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 I think like one of my like favorite I mean, I guess it depends on your definition of crazy, because definitely could go the route where the one of the practices that I worked at before, we were a very busy home birth practice, so I got to go to a lot of births and I saw a lot of things, and I've seen like shoulder dystocia, I've seen hemorrhage, and I've definitely seen some pretty, I guess, like crazy hemorrhage out like in very like remote places. But I think like one of the most like unexpected things that I've seen during delivery that was pretty crazy is that one of the babies that I witnessed being born, their cord snapped as they were being born, which I've never seen before. And at first, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, oh my gosh, like, how could that happen? But I think one of the reasons I really love this story is because I hear so much from families and people who come to me with experience having their babies in the hospital, as I've heard so many times a reason for C-section being like cords being wrapped around babies' necks, or cords being too short, or they're being tangled or whatever. I've heard so many women tell me like, oh yeah, I couldn't birth my baby because the cord was just wrapped so many times, they would have never been born, it would have never happened. And I'm not here to say what is true or not for anybody's birth, but just that I love this story so much because to me it's such a good reminder that that nature works. Like babies want to be born. Like as nature, we want to survive, right? Birth is designed to work as if no one was there. And in this case, like this baby and this mom's body, like they found a way. After baby was born, what we saw is that baby's cord was like super short. And so she was pushing for a long time. Like that was sort of unexpected, because when you've had a baby before, usually like the amount of time that you spend pushing decreases, not always, but just usually. And so she had been pushing for a long time, and then all of a sudden it just made sense, and that baby did what it needed to do to be born. And everything was okay. Like once the baby's born, you just you grab the cord and you clamp it, so baby doesn't lose blood. But it's not something that would require like more intervention or C-section, right? Like that baby just found a way to be born. And I've seen babies born with cords wrapped around their neck, under their arm, around the leg. It's like most of the time, like birth works, babies find a way.
Yes, I love that because like you said, life always finds a way. And that was like
Mm-hmm.
my motto when I was pregnant. Like it's okay. Life finds a way, life fights. I mean, you see little
Mm-hmm.
flowers and little um vines or whatever coming through concrete all the time, and
Yes.
life finds a
Uh-huh.
way. I would always picture that,
Mm-hmm.
like it's okay. And so last question so that we can wrap this up: if you could put
Yeah.
one message on a billboard for all moms to see, what would it be?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, so what I would put on the billboard, like, I feel like it would be something to the effect of, I mean, really, what I just want to say to mothers so much is just like, rise. I just want like, rise, mothers. Like, our time is now, because I don't think that it's going to be like any law, any doctor, anyone else that like saves birth. It's going to be mothers. It's going to be mothers waking up to our intuition and to our knowing, that to remember what is birth, and that we can birth, and that we are so powerful. Women are so
Yes.
powerful. If you choose to give birth, giving birth will be one of the most powerful things that you ever do. And just encourage mothers to step into that conscious awareness, no matter where or how you choose to give birth. Just do it consciously, because when you have the opportunity to birth in consciousness and to birth empowered, it can be so healing, not just for you, but for your babies and for generations forward. I really think that birth is going to be one of the ways that we really heal this planet moving forward.
Yes, I love that so much. And I thank
Mm.
you again for coming on. I definitely want to have you back on so we can dissect so many more topics, in the future. But thank you for your time, Kayla. Like I said, I follow her
Yeah.
all the time. I love everything she posts. I'm big on just doing a lot of things natural, and I'm constantly picking her brain. So again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've had such a good time. Again, I appreciate you so much. And I would love to come back to, yeah, there's so many things that we can talk about. And anytime you want to have me back, I would be honored. But thank you so much.
And as always, guys, you can catch us every Monday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Bye. Catch y'all next time.
Living in the moment, it's the mom life.